Hey buddy, it's Mike here. Today we are talking about Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen. So in this video, I'm going to discuss the features that you'll find in this modern Switch release, compare it to the original Game Boy Advance release in 2004, and kind of compare FireRed compared to your modern Pokemon game. And at the end, I'll let you know if it's ultimately worth buying this Switch release of Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen, or if it's an absolute cash grab like everyone's freaking out about. So Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen, it recently came out on the Nintendo Switch, and it actually released in 2004 on the original Game Boy Advance. So now, instead of releasing it on the app on the Switch, on the Game Boy Advance app, they released it as a standalone game. And there's just been some controversy about it. Some people are absolutely freaking out that they have to pay, $29.99 Canadian or $20 US dollars. And I'm going to give you my thoughts because in this channel, as you know, I'm all about, saving you guys money and giving you my thoughts. So is this a ripoff? In short, no. I think people are kind of overreacting about this. Here in Canada, $29.99 you can get a bagel, a coffee, and maybe a hash brown, if that, at $29.99. With the game like Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen, you can drop over 30 hours. So in a value proposition, you're going to get a lot out of it. And there is some differences between the original release versus this new release. First off, if you want to go right now and get the original game on the Game Boy Advance, that's going to cost you upwards of $150 to $200. This is releasing at $20 USD. So you can see the value there. Now, there is some differences between the Switch release compared to the original Game Boy Advance release. So Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen came out in 2004 and were basically enhanced versions of the original Pokemon Blue and Pokemon Red versions of the game. Now, with the original Game Boy Advance game, you couldn't access some of the end game content like the Sevi Islands without special real world events. Now the end game content, the Sevi Islands, which gives you access to a lot more different Pokemon from different generations, you get this automatically after you beat the Elite Four. So that's one major difference. So there's definitely that improvement there. So there's actually 7 islands which host Generation 2 and 3 Pokemon. And in terms of any massive glitches, they fixed that big glitch with the roaming legendary beasts. At the end of the game, they would use the roar move, and then that would cause them to disappear, causing you to permanently lose access to catching them. They definitely fixed this in the Switch release, so that's definitely appreciated. And now you can catch, other legendary beasts through Naval Rock and Birth Island. You can collect Deoxys, Lugia, and Ho-Ho, and this would be mostly unattainable through the original Game Boy Advance release. And one thing that kind of sucks is there's no online connectivity, so you can't, trade or battle online. That would have been a really cool feature that to add, and this would be my only complaint, if anything. It would have been cool to have the ability to trade and battle online. However, if you have 2 Switch consoles close to each other, you can trade Pokemon with yourself. But at the same time, still, it would be lovely to have that online connectivity. Maybe they'll add that later on. I know they're working on adding Pokemon Home integration, so you never know. And there are other differences that you would find in this game from a modern Pokemon game. Like, for example, the end game is much larger in your modern Pokemon game. You have those raids and events. Here, it's mostly the Sevi Islands. You don't have that online features that you would find in your modern Pokemon game. And the base goal in, Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen is to complete the national Pokedex. And that being said, it's going to take you tons of hours. You're going to get a lot of value in this. And one thing I really like about the original Pokemon games that, adds a layer of strategy, and you actually have to kind of think about who you're using or your party, the Pokemon that you have available, is that you don't have that shared XP that you find in modern Pokemon games. And I always found that to be kind of cheap, right? Like it makes it way too easy to level, your whole party of Pokemon. And I kind of like that old style. You really got to think about who you send out, and you want to use your different. It causes you to use your different Pokemon more for so they get experience. So that was just something you'd find in older Pokemon games, that just a heads up, if you play this, you're not going to have that shared XP that you'd find, in your modern game. That's kind of like the differences between, Pokemon Fire Red you'd find on the Switch compared to something on the Game Boy Advance from 2004. And I also discussed some of the differences between what you'd find in Fire Red now compared to you find from a modern Pokemon game. But is it really worth your $20 or $30 Canadian? It definitely is. And I feel like there's a lot of people making a lot of stink about this. You know, again, this channel is all about saving you money, but at the same time, you also want to get the value out of your money. It's not just about saving money, it's about getting value. And I believe this game you're going to get tons of value out of, and it has that classical Pokemon experience. How much would I love for if they actually kind of remastered this a little bit more, kind of get that 3D graphics. I know they got Let's Go Pikachu version of, but if they just kind of remastered, kept everything the same and just kind of enhanced the graphics, that would have been awesome. But you know what? I'm happy with what I have. If I'd pay $30 anytime. And I know there's people complaining, oh, they're charging different language versions. Like, for example, there's like a Portuguese version. I don't know who the heck is paying for a Portuguese version. I'm pretty sure everyone's just going to buy the English version. So I don't know how that's a problem to begin with. And yeah, you're missing some of the ROM quality of life features, but at the end of the day, I just love playing the original Fire Red. Again, I was playing more Pokemon, the original Blue and Pokemon Red. I'm aging myself a bit, but so I didn't get to spend as much time back in the day with Fire Red and Leaf Green. So I'm having tons of fun, getting back into this. And I highly suggest you do too. So, yeah, don't listen to all this crap you're hearing. Oh, that they're ripping us off. It's $20, okay? That's really not a lot of money for what you're getting from this game. But those are my thoughts on Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green on releasing on the Switch. It's not a rip-off, and it's tons of fun. I'm actually, yeah, sure, you don't have those filters, you don't have that online play, and you don't have that great end game that you'd find in a modern game, but this thing is tons of fun as it is, and it's very addicting, and it's a little bit more challenging than you'd find in a modern Pokemon game, which is great because I think the modern games are way too easy. But anyways, those are my thoughts on the Switch release of Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. If you agree, or if you disagree, please leave a comment. I want to hear your thoughts. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this video, please consider checking out my channel and subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.